Nailed it. All right, we are back. Real Migos, we got a treat for you. We have Sarah, Loans with Sarah. Sarah Morris White. She's got 19 last names. Sarah, hey, how are you?
I am good. I have a house full of kids with strep, but besides that, I'm fantastic.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us then. Sorry that you have a full house. Man, where is everybody tonight? Maybe people don't like this Thursday night deal, but the Fed is fed up. Is that a thing? Ian, what up, dude? How are you?
I'm great as always. That's really funny. The Fed is fed up. That needs to be somewhere. That's a billboard. I like it.
Yeah, don't worry. Don't worry though. Aaron's here, so we're good.
Oh, I'm not worried.
Nice. So let's jump right into it. Sarah, you're back. Usually when we have Sarah on, that means that something has happened with interest rates and the Fed and Janet Yellen and the other guy. What's the other guy?
Jerome Powell.
Yeah, that guy. Guess what? Stefan, my German friend, is here. What's up, Stefan? Good to see you. All right, Sarah, walk us through what the heck is going on, because the Fed comes out, says we're going to raise 0.25%. There's a lot of debate on what they were going to do. Then you have Janet Yellen come out, and basically the market responds wonderfully to that news. And then Janet Yellen comes out and just shoves everybody under the bus. So what's up?
Yeah, so I mean, we've had a lot of volatility ever since it came out with SVB Bank, with Silicon Valley Bank. It's where basically what happened was they invested their money, because when you put money in a bank, they invest that money to earn money off your money. Like, they don't just have it sitting there, right? That's what banks do. So they went ahead and they bought a bunch of treasury bonds at a 2% coupon, which basically rates were super low. So they bought bonds when rates were super low. Rates have gone up. So now those are underwater bonds. So they're not worth as much as if you were buying bonds today. So that led into when people started taking deposits out of SVB, and they didn't have the liquidity to give people back their money. They had to start selling those bonds and selling them at a loss. And so that's how just to kind of water it down, that was part of the issue and why that happened. And they put all their eggs in one basket, essentially, which you shouldn't do. You should diversify. So that was like the start of all of this that's happening. It's a domino effect. And then other banks started failing and coming out. And so Yellen came in, and if you got to hear some of her talks, they did come in and they did end up insuring all the deposits at Silicon Valley Bank. But when they asked her, like, oh, well, what's your plan with these other smaller banks and with everyone else? Like, what are you guys going to do? And she really didn't have a plan in place. It was basically like, oh, well, if I think that it deserves to be backed, and then it goes to the Fed, and then it goes to the president and everyone else, it's basically like there's no plan. If we think that they deserve to get to, I don't want to say they refuse it's a bailout, but if they think that it deserves it, then we get to choose. And so that really didn't sit easy with a lot of people. So then we have the Fed meeting that came up the last 2 days. We had
let's be honest though, it's a bailout because they're bailing out the depositors, which are people that are with big companies, tech companies. So they have to bail them out, right? Or they think they have to bail them out. They could have just let them fail, let other banks come in and buy up all the assets, which would refund and give the depositors back their funds. And then somebody else runs SV Bank. Instead, they bail them out. So people on my channel the other day wrote, oh, it wasn't a bailout. I'm like, well, you want to finagle the term however you want. It's still a bailout. Continue.
Well, and the big thing why it was such a big deal with SVB Bank, and you mentioned it, is because it's a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of techs, a lot of startups. That's where they get their funds, and they have payroll deposits. And that was the big thing. And that's why it wasn't just your everyday person's deposits. It was payroll deposits that are paying other people's and employees and everything else. And that was the problem. And payroll, FDIC insures up to $250,000 per person, but payroll deposits are usually going to be at least $1 million, somewhere around there. And so it was going to be a trickle effect, or domino effect, right? So that's why that was so important, and they jumped in to do that and to help them out. So it wasn't they declared it systemic risk, what the term was. But so after all this was happening, right? Jerome Powell, Fed met. They had their 2 days, and then Jerome Powell spoke. And they did decide to increase the Fed fund rate by 25 bips. And that, which is crazy because the Fed has raised too much. They've gone too far. They're just impatient. Like, it takes time. When you raise these federal fund rates, it takes time for that to affect the economy and for us to see the data. And they just can't hold their horses and just wait for that data to come out. They've done enough. And so hopefully, and this was in his speech yesterday, where it hinted that this might be the last one. So fingers crossed that this was the last rate hike that we will see, and that there will be enough data. And finally, Jerome Powell did admit that there was a lag in rents, because if you look at it, 43%, don't hate me. It's like 43 or 44% of core inflation is shelter. And a lot of that is rents. And rents are 12-month leases typically, right? That's the most common. So if you look, as those 12-month leases come due, rent has gone down, not up, and nationally. And so that number is going to go down, but there's a lag. And so now we're starting to see that lag. And finally, Jerome Powell admitted to that when he spoke yesterday. So that's good that they're starting to see some of these things. And hopefully they're going to just wake up and realize they can't keep increasing it. They're going to crash the economy because of looking in the rearview mirror at old data instead of waiting to see the new data from what they've done and the implementation of the rate hikes they've already put in place. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I know Janet Yellen came out after he said that, though. Janet Yellen came out and basically, I don't know if she was the one that like basically said he should be. I know. Oh God, what's her face? Um, One of those legislators came out and said that he needed to be fired and removed from his post. What's her name? Elizabeth. What's her name?
Uh,
Anyway, so you have people like saying that Jerome Powell needs to be fired now, and Janet Yellen she didn't really quiet the banks and all of that afterwards. So then you saw the market kind of react. But I was just showing here. So for us, what that means right now is if you look at the 10-year Treasury bond, it's gone down. Was it like 3.5% or something like that? So now we're interest rates are around 6.4. They've stayed in that really since Monday. They peaked at 675 and they've come down. I don't think there's a big anticipation that they'll see a big spike tomorrow. The anticipation, from what I've read, is going to be a quite mild tomorrow. But Ian, what's your take on all this? Yeah, Elizabeth Warren. There you go. Yeah, Elizabeth Warren came out and said that you need to be fired or taken out of office, which was crazy. But what are your thoughts and take on this real Migo elect?
It says whatever. I do worry about the fact that the rent is obviously a lagging indicator, and now now Jerome Powell is starting to pay closer attention to that, and I wonder how that actually impacts people and actually will impact just rental rates moving forward. Just overall rentals. I'm not worried as much about the interest rate. I think that I'm hoping that they'll cool off on that and that'll start to come down. But now I'm worried about people that are that have these properties, they're renting, and it's something that Aaron and I were talking about a couple days ago. I'm curious what's going to happen there.
Well, as far as rentals, I'm not super worried about just regular rentals. I was listening to some information, looking at some information. People are starting to get worried about commercial rents. But if you look at newer rentals for commercial rents, so commercial being like commercial offices, they're close to 100% in some areas. Some areas, the older stuff is what's not renting. So banks are having a hard time lending on these commercial loans because they don't know what to value things at, is basically what it broke down to. So it's curious to see what happens in the commercial space. It's curious to see how this continues to impact real estate. I mean, we are March 23rd in the Austin housing market. We have almost 10,000 units on the market available right now. We saw that obviously we're down. Austin's down 6%. The MSA is down 12% year over year. If you haven't seen the video I put out on Tuesday, definitely go watch that. I break down some good information in there. So, but the thing is that we're seeing, Ian, and correct me if I'm wrong, and Sarah, you're also in the industry, I'm still seeing strong offers on properties that are priced well. I'm still seeing stuff moving. I'm meeting with sellers pretty much. I've met with sellers every day this week talking about listing. We're looking at doing some high-end stuff on the Austin Luxury Network. So overall, the market, because the time of year hasn't really taken a hit like I thought it would have, but it's also not as strong as it could be. What are your thoughts on the market currently, especially how this relates to the housing market, Sarah? And then I'll go to you, Ian.
Yeah, I feel so. What the clients that I've been working with right now, I agree. Like some of them have had multiple offers, especially on competitive priced homes or well-priced homes. The ones where I've seen reductions or I've seen stay on the market for a little while, if I have a buyer that's selling and buying, were more the luxury or higher priced homes, like over 500,000. That price point, I have seen some price reductions, especially with some of my new build clients. But it's anything below that. I've seen multiple offers again, and which has been really great. And it has been really busy, surprisingly. So I think that at the end of the day, there's still a supply and demand issue. There's still people that need homes. And I think that if you need a home, you're going to be buying a home. And I will say that as far as like rates, like and how this affects to like interest rates and what's happening right now Right now, we're not seeing as much movement because people are confused with how the Fed is going to officially handle this and how the market's going to handle it, with either buying more mortgage-backed securities or letting everything kind of like slow the economy slow more. And it kind of, I don't like using the term crash, but letting the economy slow so much that it will cause interest rates to go a lot lower. So, I mean, as far as like the outlook there, I think that would also help people get out there and buy more homes when that happens.
In his Jerome Powell speech the other day, he did say that there was that pretty much he said like 12 plus times that they of the upcoming recession. So I think if you're looking at Jerome Powell and people in charge, they are basically saying, yes, a recession is imminent. And so that's interesting to hear. And then I was posting at the same time right here, the unemployment rate in Austin. This is something I've been talking about for a while, that the unemployment rate was under 3% for months. I mean, months. And now with all the layoffs in Austin in the tech industry and the tech quarter, now we're up to 3.2 as of January. This is lagging because we don't have the February numbers yet. So that all of those things will impact our housing market. And that could be what's, Stefan's saying right here. For smaller apartments, the rents in my apartment at the lowest, I recorded $1,700 rent. 2-bedroom in October is now $1,300. So it's a fast change. So a lot of times you see with that, two people, like these apartment complexes offer, it's interesting because right now you'd imagine a lot of people would be renting. So I find it odd that they're that big of a disparity. But Stefan, I'd love to hear from you. What do you think the reason in that specific apartment complex they saw a $400 drop? Ian,
so that was kind of my point. I don't think I articulated it well when you had asked earlier. So you've got people that were coming in for the last couple of years, and a lot of them were trying to get as many properties as they could, right? So a lot of investors, first time, second time, and kind of gaining some properties, a foothold on some assets. And then you have those people that were renting out, leasing out these properties. Now you have the rental rates declining while the property values are declining and the interest rates are high. So people need to stay renting, yet the rental prices are going down and your property taxes are going up if you have all of these properties. So it's almost like this weird delta, and they're both going in the opposite direction. And so the question becomes, something has to give. Either rents have to stabilize or property taxes have to stabilize, which they're working on right now, right? That they just passed something for that too. But if we have, as we're increasing in rental inventory, residential rental inventory, that just makes it harder for the people that are investors and do have these properties. Let's say they have 3 or 4 properties. It's harder for them to get market rent right this minute.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Stefan says that there's just an influx of apartment complexes in his area. This is interesting because I actually had Bloomberg reach out to me, what was it, about a month ago, asking about this. And I told him I couldn't give him comment because I didn't know enough about it. But at the time, I did find an article showing that Austin it was like 23,000 units online for rental units online for 2023. And I think the highest, but the highest like saturation rate was somewhere in Florida. It was like 18, or Phoenix was the highest saturation rate or something like that. So it's no surprise to me because Austin has been trying to catch up with all this new build. In 2020, 2021, 2022, we saw all of these people moving into Austin. Now we're seeing issues in tech where some of these companies are laying off people. The market's a little bit softer. All the rates that we're talking about are impacting businesses. A lot of people don't understand how those rates impact businesses, but the bank's transferring money at 6.75 or whatever the Fed fund rate is. It does impact the way businesses do business. And so it's harder to have employees with that high. And so that's part of what they wanted to do, was to increase the unemployment rate. But the thing that's still crazy to me is how many jobs there are available, even in Austin. There's still a lot of jobs available. So I'd like to see, and maybe you have seen something where some of the people getting laid off in this industry or in these industries are just getting picked back up, if that's something. But seeing that the unemployment rate did go up shows me that no, not all of them have found new jobs. They're getting laid off. So
if you look at and that's what's really interesting, because if you look at the national unemployment number, it actually has, so new unemployment this past week has stayed the same, but the recurring jobless claims, which basically are people that have been laid off, that quit, whatever it is, that haven't been able to find employment, it keeps increasing every month. That number keeps increasing. So it's saying that employers are trying to hold on to employees if they can, but if they aren't and people are let go or they quit, they're not able to find jobs. Like they're having a very difficult time finding jobs. And I think that was part of everything that the Fed has said and the Jerome Powell said about employment is so far off. And I know I mentioned this last time where the numbers are off with the population control numbers and everything else. It looks like employment is so much better than it is. And also they brought up, yesterday, well, we want the employment to be worse, unemployment rate to be higher, employment numbers to be worse to show that we're in a recession. It's like, if you look at the history of recessions, unemployment rate isn't super high when recessions happen. They're the lowest that they've ever been. And then because of the recession, they get higher. So that's not a good indicator and that's what they keep talking about, which is frustrating.
One of the things that you always want to track when you're talking about jobs, and I don't have any information on this that I can share, but if you're getting a new job because you want to get a new job, how many people are actually getting let go and then they're finding a job where the pay scale is the same, because chances are their cost of living has increased with their pay, especially if they're relocating in some place, they're buying a couple properties, buying even one nice property. What's the likelihood that if they get let go, they can pick up another job and make that same cost of living, like make that same income? I think that's the big issue. And so people, they start to get desperate after 2 months, 3 months. And so they'll take almost any job at a lesser income. And that starts to create a decline in spending and fueling some sort of recessionary situation.
Yeah.
What's interesting to see too, if you think about it, is that for most people, and we're staying on this rental, is how that's actually going to impact the Austin market overall. Obviously, we're going into a spring market where things are picking up, but with interest rates around 6.4 and prices still being high and not necessarily quote unquote affordable in the Austin area, it is cheaper for people to rent. I mean, I could do the math for you right now. On a $500,000 home at 6.4% interest rate with 20% down, you're going to be paying probably well higher than you could for a 2-bedroom apartment. Now, are you getting equity? Are you having tax deductions with that? Those are all things to look at to see if it's financially better for you to own a home. Yet it is more expensive. Now, if you were someone like one of us who purchased a home when interest rates were lower, even at a higher price, I mean, I purchased our current home at a much higher price, but I got a fairly good interest rate because the interest rates hadn't gone up that much before June. Yet, like, my mortgage is pretty manageable. For other people, it's not going to be that manageable. I mean, what are your overall thoughts on the market seeing a shift, the housing market seeing a shift because people decided to rent longer?
Yeah. I feel like that, in my opinion, I feel like that we're going to see a difference between people. I feel like we're going to see an increase in primary residence purchases versus investor. And again, this is just my opinion. So y'all can tell me what you're seeing. But I feel like we're going to have an increase in primary resident purchases versus investor, because investor, it has to make sense for cash flow. I don't think that makes sense right now with where the market's going in Austin. It could for the right person. I'm just saying generically. And I think that that's going to be a big shift. I think over the last couple of years, we've just seen so many investors come in and just try to, buy up the market so they can have, a portfolio and all these things. And I had a couple investor clients that just bought this last year, or even like 3 months ago, that are already selling the properties they bought. So,
Why is that?
and
Just wasn't renting?
yeah, one tried to sell. So I have a client that bought like $1 million property out in Lakeway for as an investment in January. And they tried to put it on the market in like July, and they couldn't get a return. Like they couldn't sell it. Like it just didn't happen. But now he's rented out and he's keeping that one. But then he bought 2 other properties, one in Pflugerville, one in where was the other one? One in Pfluger, another one in Lakeway for much less. And it's not making sense. And because they were new builds, he was able to get them at such a good price that he's just going to make more money selling them than ever he is trying to rent. Probably because of what all these people are saying and what you guys were saying, to your point, that you're not going to, because these apartments, everything are coming up where there's cheaper rental amounts out there, they're not going to be able to cash flow or make the money they thought they would. So they're just going to cut bait and go somewhere else. And he's actually now buying property up in the outside of Dallas area. So it's just interesting that that's starting to happen. And that's what I've started seeing.
I have 2 members of my team, same exact situation where they had investors that had put in money into this property. One of them was actually a group of investors, and for whatever reason, they have to cut ties, drop the investment, and they sold it for what I would say is 50 to 100,000 less than they would have had this time last year, like easily. And they just had to go. They're like, we're not waiting. We're going to cut our losses and run.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
Anecdotally, I had a potential client reach out. We were chatting about different neighborhoods and things like that. And this person was like, I want to pay for a property in Lakeway or Dripping Springs. What I don't like that the taxes have gone up so much and the valuations on homes have gone up so much. So I want to pay for a home what the 2019 prices were. And I want whatever the tax base was for 2019. That's the price I want to offer on homes.
Okay.
And I want
that would be nice.
I kind of almost fell out of my chair because I was thinking, well, I mean, I would love to buy a 2019 home.
Yeah.
What data are you using to show that like a seller would take that? Like it was interesting to me. Anyway, this kind of anecdotal, but prices have come down. Do you think that people are still waiting to see prices fall even further? In the comments, I want to hear from you. Aaron, who's been looking at buying properties. Actually, I want to get to Aaron's point here. Aaron said that his mortgage went up $1,000 a month. Now, that means that your taxes on a property went up $12,000. Let me ask you this. Was that because you bought a new build and it was at like whatever, $1,700, and then they finally assessed it at $12,000 or $13,000? Or did your taxes actually double where you're at $7,000 and now it's $19,000, whatever that is? It's interesting. Aaron wants a private island, so I definitely want to hear about this private island idea. It sounds like great. I would love to be buying 2019 prices. Trust me. Our condo just sold or is under contract right now in Sal Padre. We listed our Sal Padre Airbnb that we had, and I'm sad to sell it, but it is gone, and we're going to be buying more properties here in Austin, Ian and Sarah. So there you go.
Yay. Oh, Parth. Hi, Parth. Sorry.
A follow-up from the question you had asked Aaron about, so the property taxes went up. Can he increase rent to support it? And the answer is likely no. That's the real question, right? So if he can't, then what? And I'm not saying him. He's in, not to get too involved in his personal situation, but not everyone is in a position to be able to absorb that difference.
Right.
And that goes back to the point. Because if that's the case, what do they do with their properties?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
So he's paying for whatever reason the year before they didn't collect enough taxes. So now they're saying that they need to collect the previous year plus this year. So that's $1,000 a month. This is so
crazy.
Look, before the pandemic, we were doing the live streams on my YouTube channel, we kept saying this and over and over and over again. And the pandemic hit, Ian. And so we talked a lot about this during the pandemic. I kept talking about how bad taxes were and how they were going to impact people. And the primary story when I tell people about be aware what the taxes are is a client bought a property with somebody else. They didn't explain how the taxes work. They didn't tell them that they had to do the homestead. They didn't explain. Some agent did not do that. They bought a property. They didn't pay all of their taxes because their escrow didn't collect enough taxes that year. And then they went up. So they ended up owing like $7,000 on their property taxes, and they could not afford that. So they had to sell their home. So this is why I made such a big deal. And I've made videos talking about the fact that if you're going to buy in a new build community, be aware that the property taxes will go up way more than you think they will, A. And B, if you decide to sell, you're going to have your biggest competition is going to be the builder you just purchased from. So be very careful. And so over the last 2 years, it was very tough because there's so much demand. People were buying properties. Remember this, Ian, everyone was asking us, is this a good deal? Is that a good deal? And we're saying, well, it's all relative to you in this situation, because buying and everybody was trying to buy up these brand new homes that were taking 18 to 24 months to build. And now, Ian, you and I are both going back and selling those homes that were completed in 2022. Like I just sold another 2022 listing in January.
Yep, absolutely. And another thing about the property taxes, people were thinking, well, I'll get in, my property taxes are going to be low. We do know that there's going to be a little spike, but we'll file our homestead right away. Well, now you file your homestead, it still doesn't take effect for a year and a half. So you're not going to actually save what you think you're going to save. And to Dinosaur D's point, this is kind of a sidebar. He says, hey, Ian, 56K. I have fiber coming April 10th. I'm so excited.
Yeah, you are a little laggy.
Fiber.
I have to be completely honest. I don't watch Reventure. I used to see some of the data he put out. And after all the misleading data I saw him put out, I just completely stopped watching. So people will send me clips here and there. So I don't know what he's saying about Austin, but I had somebody tell me, like, I watched Reventure, then I watched your channel, and then I kind of take the two and put them in the middle, and I figure out from there. I think that's fair, right? So you have to listen to the other sides. Yes, we're realtors. Yes, we make money on selling homes, but I think the difference is we're not sitting here advocating that you use us to buy a home. I can't tell you how many people I've come in contact with. They're like, I bought a home using your channel. So you can call me and Ian and Sarah to buy a home, but that's not what we're asking for on this channel. The whole point is to give good information. So I think it's important to listen to what Reventure is saying. I think it's important to listen to what we're saying and then find a middle ground. So there you go. Clip that, put that out. That way people stop hitting me up that I'm some evil person because I sell homes. Ian is going to get 56K or above 56K soon. And then Ian, no way my taxes are too high. They will adjust down next year when I make some cash flow. The rent on the property is $2,000. So here's the other thing too. And I want to ask you, Sarah, this question, because we live in the same neighborhood out in Dripping Springs. Property taxes are pretty high. Property values went up 56%. We just talked about that. What do you think the likelihood is that the property taxes come down in 2023 when the valuations come out in about 35 days?
I would never and I guess I should never say never, but honestly, I would never expect or plan for property taxes to come down low or appraised values to come down low. A lot would have to happen in my mind for that to be the case. I would love it. I would love it if that were to happen, but I wouldn't I wouldn't plan for it.
Ian.
So there was a comment earlier about the homestead exemption and the Senate passing the bill. And I don't remember who said that, but the idea is that the homestead exemption will be increased. The exemption itself will be increased for everyone across the board, right? So the people that are filing for homestead and the people that have their over 65 exemptions. So theoretically, property taxes are going down in the future. But if the value of the property doesn't match that, then they're still going to tax you at the same rate. They're not going to give money away.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen.
I feel like it's somehow going to balance each other out. I feel like, and that's basically where I was getting at. I wouldn't plan if it does great, but anytime I hear this stuff until I see it,
But it's what, robbing Peter to pay Paul, because all they're going to do is reassess the following year and it's going to rise. They're going to say that their
Right.
house is worth more, and so you'll get back to that point. So you think you're getting a deal. So it spiked pretty high. They'll bring it down a little
56%.
bit, and then it's going to come right back up.
56% on average in Austin, it went up. But go ahead. So when you say spiked, it almost it went up 56%.
Yeah, it was a dagger to the heart, man.
Sorry.
One thing, if you're an investor, that I'd be looking at this year is, so in Texas, with the property taxes, if you don't pay your property taxes at the beginning of the year, which is by January 31st, whatever that is, then you go into default. There's a bunch of penalties, and throughout the year, pretty much by July, it gets really expensive. So I would be looking for properties that the seller needs to get out because they're facing tax delinquencies. That I would look for properties that are potentially going to get bought up because of tax delinquencies. So I would be looking at tax delinquencies heavily. And so I would be searching the tax information. Like, you can search this stuff. I mean, it's public information, but I would be searching and looking at properties that have tax default, and I would be targeting those properties if I was an investor.
That's
Winky smiley face.
It's actually funny. Oh, sorry, Jeremy.
No, but
I was like, it's funny you mentioned that, because I actually got a call from a realtor earlier this week, and she has a seller that where financing fell through on the buyer buying the property, but the seller has to sell, because if they don't sell ASAP, they're going to go into foreclosure because they couldn't make those payments. So I mean, they are, to your point, like, I'm starting to see that happen, at least with one property this week.
Interesting. I like this comment by Aaron. Aaron's been talking about this. I have to be honest with you, Aaron. I haven't looked into this as much as you've commented several times about it. I have yet to really look into this as being a future problem, but I see this as being a problem. So I don't say I haven't looked into it because I'm focused on a bunch of other stuff, but I think there's some validity in what Aaron's saying here. So he's saying, as an investor, I'm waiting for December. The damage for tax increases and student loan payments will mostly be done. I think December is the earliest for me. So what he's saying here is that the moratorium on paying your student loans ends in September. So we're probably could see a lot of people, and think about it. If you were somebody that had student loans that were $500,000, $600,000 a month, and for the last 2.5 years you haven't had to pay those, have you been saving that money on the side, or were you? And that's actually a fair question. If you're one of these people, I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you been saving that money aside, knowing that you're going to have to be paying it, or have you been using that money to buy other things? And on top of that, are you expecting everybody to be bailed out by the government on student loans? Now, it's not me trying to throw a dagger at anybody. I'm just, because I do know people that are saying, I'm not going to pay because the government's going to bail us out on student loan debt. So I want to hear your responses and see if anybody mentions it in the comments as far as student loan payments being put back on and harming the market.
One of my follow-up questions would be, what percentage of people, so let's look at like 80-20 rule. Is it less than 20% of people that are borrowing for their first mortgage that currently have student loans? And Sarah, you'd be the perfect person to answer that.
I would. I don't have that I don't have that number.
When people talk to you, like how frequently is it that they have a massive student loan payment, but they're buying their first home at the same time in Austin specifically?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I feel like the majority of people I work with have some sort of student loan debt. But this is the thing. So when we qualify someone for a mortgage, even if they're currently paying zero and they currently don't have a payment, we have to put a payment in there. So that way, when we're qualifying for a mortgage, we're not putting that borrower at risk of becoming underwater or foreclosing when they do have a payment come due, even if they're in the process of getting their loans forgiven. Because I have a couple of those, and it's because of civil service and things like that, where they accumulated enough qualifying payments, et cetera. But I do have a large portion of my client base that do have student loans, but we do account for that with qualifying for them. So they shouldn't get in trouble once they have that payment come in again.
Well,
but oh, sorry, go ahead, Ian.
I was gonna say the reality is somebody might do that and then say, okay, clear, we got the house. Now we can spend, what is it? I had a client do like $12,000 on a water softener and put it on a loan. I was like, wait, what did you do? Why didn't you call me? What? Like that kind of stuff, right? Or they were waiting to get their car until they closed on the house, and now their payment's $700 extra a month. So they qualified and they had student loans, and you were planning for that. However, they didn't plan for it, like Jeremy said, but they didn't establish a savings. They were like, now I've got money to spend. We're in the clear.
And I think that does happen a lot, unfortunately. And, and it doesn't matter what type of conversation I have with them. There's just people that will spend. And if they have the money available, they'll spend, and they're just not good budgeters or savers, or they're not people that think that far ahead. And then there's people that are. But yeah, I don't doubt that there's people that are doing that and not preparing themselves.
This conversation right now that's happening in the chat, assumable loans. I'm gonna tell you, I've had so many calls from investors lately asking, "Hey, I saw that you've got this listing. Will your sellers be willing to work out a deal? Seller financing, assumable, anything like that?" Everybody's waiting. They are waiting. They're asking everyone if they can work something out.
So there's a real estate company in Austin that it's recruiting. I have to be careful about what I say here. So
student loan kids.
No, they're going after would be or want to be investors. The people that are in that wholesale space. I look at people that get into the wholesale, like, oh, I'm going to sell wholesale deals, and I look at them and I kind of roll my eyes because there's a lot more work that goes into wholesaling than people anticipate, and there's a lot of liability in there as well. So there's a brokerage that is going after people that are in basically getting their real estate license to go do that. And so they are throwing around these, just like Ian said, these offers on properties that make 0 sense. And they're just hoping, so they have these people just writing crazy dumb offers like this and hoping people will bite. My comment on this is that assumable loans, so Daniel's here, I've had this up a while, so you've probably read it. Say someone bought in May 2022 and wanted to walk away from the property as they no equity. As a buyer, can I structure that deal to just take over the note? Now you can, but realize you might not have equity in that property. There's a lot of different moving parts with these types of loans. And so if the seller wanted to walk away, sure. But if you're trying to assume the note, there's a lot of things to jump through. It's not as easy as just, I'm going to write. You're still going to have to get pre-approved and approved to take over that mortgage. It's not like you can just step in and go, okay, I'm taking over the note. Sarah, go.
Yeah, well, and then also assumable mortgages are only FHA and VA, and they're only government loans. So you can't assume a conventional loan, which is what typically these are. And if you look at government loans, they're primarily primary resident. Anyway, yeah, I mean, a lot of times as an investor, you're not going to want to assume a government loan. You want a conventional loan, right? So that's also a part. And if you're not a veteran, you can't assume a VA loan. There's other pieces that play here.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine somebody trying to do that. Hey, Matt, ask this question again in 5 minutes. I want to answer it. I did read this, so I just want to stay on the topic that we're on.
I like Parth's comment about realtors aren't able to tell wholesalers apart. It's very true, because wholesalers, you don't need a license to play the middleman in that circumstance. And so now you're dealing with people who take one class, and they think that they're experts, and they're playing with hundreds of thousands of your future dollars, right? Like, it's really, really kind of bothersome to think about.
Well,
at least
so think about it too. So here's how a wholesale deal would work. Sarah wants to sell her house. I come in and go, Sarah, I love this house. And you know what, Sarah, I'm going to buy it off you. You need the money or whatever the situation is. I come to Sarah and go, look, this house is worth $250,000. And Sarah goes, okay, that'll pay off all the things I need to get rid of. Perfect. And then I go, hey, Ian, I have this house that I picked up for $250,000. I signed the contract as my name and or assigns. So I can assign the contract to you. So here's the deal. I want to sell you this property for $275,000. Okay. So if you don't do a blind closing and that seller finds out that you just did that, now if the seller is okay with it, fine. But if the seller finds out that you wholesaled it, you may run into a lot of issues. Now, there's a lot of legal stuff that happens in there, but you want to make sure if you're a wholesaler that you're disclosing things appropriately. And if you're going to do a blind, and I know a lot of people that do blind closings all the time, they do it because they don't want the seller to know they just sold that $250,000 home and made a $50,000 profit. And that way too, the title companies just cut you a separate check because you wholesaled it. Now, here's a deal though. If you're the wholesaler and you get it for $250, and then you go to, Sarah, we got a deal for $250. I go to Ian. Ian's like $300. I'm in. And then Ian backs out last minute. You, Mr. Wholesaler, are probably taking down that property. And then do you have the capital to do the flip on that? Do you have the capital to take it over? So you run into some issues where you could have problems. So wholesaling is not as easy as people make it sound. So if you're going to get into wholesaling, go to my seminar, jeremyknight.com/wholesaling. It's amazing. We're going to make you tons of money.com. And you can go through my $3,000 course to show you how to become a wholesaler. I'm just kidding. I don't have that.
20,000, buddy.
Yeah.
20,000.
Do you see Dinosaur D? Can I get a certificate?
Yeah. We'll give you a diamond hands. The certificate has diamond hands on it. So yeah. And realtors, this is what Par says. What does it typically cost to refinance? Great question for Sarah.
Yeah. So typically, you're going to look anywhere from, if you include title and everything else, you could look at anywhere between $3,000 to $5,000 if you escrow and have a lot in taxes. There's a lot of great programs right now. A lot of people have. I know we have one that help with people that are buying right now to refinance, because we feel that mortgage rates are going to, like, high likelihood will be coming down sometime within the next 5 years, probably before then. But that you could get that down. But I would say you could go ahead and safely assume somewhere between $3,000 to $5,000, and you could potentially roll that into your loan, so you're not having to pay that.
I was about to say that. Is now a good time for home improvements? For example, pool building, out of pocket, no borrowing, as in, will it be a negative impact on my property tax? So it's interesting how that works as far as the property taxes go. I can't go too far into the property tax and how that will impact your home from a property tax standpoint. But, as long as the property tax assessor doesn't add value to that pool, then you should be okay, but don't take that as solid. I would definitely do some more investigation of that. But as far as like building a pool, hey, Sarah, by the way, you're going to have to come over to my pool party that's going to be in about a week, because the pool's almost done.
Oh, that's awesome.
Much faster. Yeah, no, it's not cheaper. I can tell you that. It is not cheaper. It is more expensive than it was the first time around during COVID. So I'll say, if you're going to do a home improvement, it's interesting. If you're going to do a home improvement because you're going to sell the home in 6 months, okay, I think that's smart, just because, hear me out, if you're going to do an improvement right now, a lot of the stuff we see on the market, Ian, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that great. Even our own neighborhood, Sarah, unless it's the new section, the older stuff is that brown on brown. It's the stuff like it's the 2006 to 2012 built home that isn't neutrally appealing right now. Yeah. So is that what you're seeing in the market right now, Ian, too? A lot of just like this okay stuff. It's not super appealing.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is if you look at the houses that are sitting for the longer amounts of time today, check and see. It's kind of weird because it's starting to get warm a little bit, right? But if you look at the houses with pools, they're sitting just as long, but at a higher price, like substantially higher price point, right? Because
my Hutto property, the house across the street sat for 90 plus days. Our one with the pool we listed across the street, much higher, went under contract in 7. So just
wait, say that one more time. It did what?
so if you have a pool right now and you were selling a home with a pool, chances are you're going to sell that home for a little more than the other comps, more than the other comps, and at a much faster turnaround. Because
Yeah,
and I
but
used
how
to tell
much
people
more?
this.
Like, what was that value difference?
What was that?
What was
Hundreds
that
of
value
thousands of
difference?
dollars, almost $200,000 difference.
That's a big deal. That's a big deal. Like I said, it's kind of weird because it's starting to get warmer. But when you're looking back in like December and November, I guess everything was a little off back then. I love the "Don't Move to Texas" popcorn. That's their name. Don't move to Texas.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's,
So somebody was talking about recasting earlier. Sarah helped me out with a recast. Thanks, Sarah. We recasted a loan recently, the house we purchased. So recasting is definitely a good way to do it. So I just explained this to a client today. So like, let's say you want to buy a house and you have the 20% down or 10% or whatever Sarah says you can put down on a property. So you buy the new property, then you list the old property, you sell that, and then you have, let's say you bought $1 million property, you sell your older property, now you have 800,000 sitting there that you want to put into something. So you can recast the loan you have up to what, 8 months or 10 or 12 months, Sarah?
so with us, so each lender is a little different. So ours, like you can recast as many times as you want during the as you hold the loan. And you need to have a minimum of 10,000 to go towards the principal that you're lowering. So and usually it costs somewhere between $150 and $200, and that's for recording charges and whatnot. But it's a great way to lower your monthly payment and just do a one bulk principal payment, and then rework and lower your monthly payment. You get years taken, like naturally. It doesn't show up on the recording, but I mean, you're taking years off your loan because of the big principal payment you're making, and you're lowering your monthly. It's great. You're not adding time onto your loan. The interest rate stays the same. But yeah, you can do it as many times. At least with us, everyone's a little different. So check with your lender if you're going to ask about recasting, because each terms might change. But for us, you can do as many times as you want as with the loan.
I'm trying to pull up this article that he's talking about. Matt's talking about. The next question we had on here, this is a good one. This actually, so not planning to sell after adding a pool, will I lose my homestead exemption? No, you won't. Whatever you do to your property, the upgrades you do to your property don't impact your homestead. It is your homestead, so it's not going to impact your homestead. Now, your homestead won't come off, but they may assess your home for more, so you will see an increase in your taxes if they assess your home for more, if they found out you built a pool or did improvements to it. So, but the one hand does not talk to the other. So the tax assessor is not talking to the city about what upgrades you've done to your home. So those two things just don't talk to each other. So you should be hopefully okay there. Let's see, buying some Bitcoin, just buy and hold some Bitcoin. This is the best financial advice you'll ever get. I don't think that's what it said. Do y'all work with lenders familiar with Texas Veteran Land Board mortgages, Sarah?
Yes, I do. I work with Texas Vet. They call Texas Vet loans. That's what we call them for short, but we do work with Texas Veteran Land Board mortgages. My husband's military. I love helping military. So if you have questions, just post them out there. The cool thing about the Texas Veteran Land Board option is that they give a discounted interest rate for veterans that depend on their disability rating. So sometimes that's really good and it's lower than what the market is. Sometimes it's not, but they do charge fees for their program as well. So you really want to get with your lender to just find out if that's the best option for you if you're getting a loan. And you don't have to have a VA loan to get that. You have to be a veteran, but it can also be coupled with a conventional loan as well. So, but yeah, if you have questions, feel free to ask.
Perfect. We were going to talk about Elon Musk tonight. I don't know if we're going to have enough time. Let's see. Is it You'll Dues? Did I say that right? I'll get to you in a second. Thanks. What is Governor Abbott going to do about helping property taxes? Look, I've been pretty nonpartisan on this channel. I've tried, I've given everybody crap. I'm going to say this. I've given city council in Austin, the mayor, a hard time. So now it's my turn to give the governor a hard time. I'm going to tell you this. I have little hope, or I have very little chances. I give them a 10% chance of actually doing something about property taxes. I don't think it's in their best interest to do anything about property taxes. So I don't think they will. What are your thoughts?
Well,
do you think Abbott's going to do something to actually help property taxes?
I mean, he's elected already, right? Like he's reelected already.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's his last term, right? This is the last term.
Yeah, that's the end of it.
So is that? I mean, think about it. Maybe he goes, all right, this is my legacy. I can put a stamp on something as my legacy. Maybe I want to run for president. So this is the last thing I did. Look at this. I mean, I don't think he's going to run for president, but like,
how old is that man?
He says, look, I put my stamp, everlasting change in Austin or Texas. So it's possible, but I highly doubt it.
We need to stop electing 90-year-old presidents. That's all I'm saying. That's not political. I don't care who it is. I don't care what they look like, what they act like, what their policies are. That's a conversation. No,
also
seriously.
High insurance if you have a pool. Is pool? I don't think I paid a higher insurance for having a pool.
Oh, that's not bad. It's 65.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I hope I'm not butchering this. You'll Dues.
You'll Dues.
Man, I messed up. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. All right, let's get to Matt's question real quick, and then we'll get back into the rest of these questions. So here's the article that he was talking about. I think it's the article he talked about. So Samsung. So this came out in the Statesman. Samsung looks like they're going to build. So at the end of the year, the tax breaks, the 313 tax breaks, we talked about this, came off, and they're actually renegotiating the 313 tax incentives. So that could be back on the books here shortly. But this is what they were using to incentivize companies to move to Texas. And it looks like Samsung may be bringing more plants. Based on this, they have the incentives. They could be bringing more plants. I think it's up to 11 more plants. The first of the 11 prospective plants wouldn't become operational until 2034. So, I mean, that's a ways off, and it was scheduled through 2042. I think it'd be good for Austin. I mean, look, they're putting a lot of money into the semiconductors here in the United States. We lost one of them to Ohio or Cincinnati or something like that recently. So I think this is really good. I think Samsung will continue its footprint in Texas. I don't see why they wouldn't. I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you think that Samsung is going to continue to build in Austin area?
Yeah, the secret there is that the tax breaks are locked in.
Yeah.
Right? Because unless someone offers a better opportunity, and I don't know what their contract looks like, but unless somebody offers a better opportunity for them to build elsewhere, they already have 2 plants here, and it only makes sense with one of their largest supply. So Samsung helps supply Tesla's cameras, right? Like I think that's part of it, which is right down the street here. They're just they're in bed with a lot of people in Austin. So it makes sense. It makes logical sense, especially with tax breaks. Heck yeah.
With the tax breaks, I agree.
Yeah, it's about the bottom line. So with those tax breaks, I completely agree with you, Ian. Like there wouldn't, unless someone else offers something better, there financially wouldn't make sense for them to change or move elsewhere.
Here's the thing. Does it work? I don't know this. So this is kind of an open-ended question. Does it work like when people were going to buy a house from a builder, they buy a house, 2 years later, the house is finished and everything is completely different and they can still back out? Yeah. Do we lose? Right. Ian? So Samsung, they're supposed to build it by 2034. Maybe they hit 2030 and they're like, yeah, that just.
Oh, I understand now.
Oh, did I drop even more? Oh my gosh. Fiber's on the way.
Well, I mean, look, so they're going to put the the way it sounds, they're going to bring back the 313 incentives, or how they do the incentives. They may call it something differently. So they're going to bring that back. So I have every confidence that they will bring it back. I would love to see a reduction in taxes. You'll duels, thank you. Man, I screwed up the second time. You'll duels, thank you. I messed it up again. You'll do Scott. Hey, Big Y. I love this though. I love this comment right here, because this is what I found the most hysterical about what happened with the quote unquote Trump tax cuts. And I try to explain this to people. Nobody listens to me about this. So Parth says, if you have more than odds. So he said a comment up here. So anyway, this is what he said. Okay. I don't hate property taxes. It's the cost of doing business. I hate the 10K limit for SALT deduction. So let me explain real quick how this worked, because part of the Trump tax cuts was they put a cap of $10,000 on what you can write off for your state taxes for federal, right? So let's say you had $100,000 in taxes you spent to your local state. You could actually deduct that from your federal taxes, and that was a deduction towards your taxes for federal, which means that less money was going federally, but going to the state. So here's what happens. They put in this cap at $10,000 SALT tax. So somebody like Ian goes, man, I want to buy a bunch of properties in Texas. So Ian goes out and buys 5 properties, spends a couple $1 million, buys all these properties, they're cash flowing. And then he goes to do his taxes in the year. And let's say each property is $10,000. So it's $50,000 in city taxes that he's paying to the city of Austin or wherever in Texas. He can only deduct $10,000. So $40,000 just, yep, it's gone. You still got to pay your federal taxes. So I didn't want to get into politics on this, but when the new administration was coming into power, they were saying, oh, we're going to get rid of the SALT tax. We're going to get rid of it. It's oppressive. It's terrible. It's been 2 years. Why didn't they get rid of the tax cut? Why didn't they get rid of the SALT tax? The reason why is it does benefit the federal government more, but they didn't want to say that while Trump was in office. Now, that's not me saying anything positive about anybody, but I'm just saying that's the reality of the facts. All right? Make sense? We all on the same page? Ian?
Yeah.
Ian has lots to say about Trump. He's a big, I'm just kidding.
I don't have lots
He's
to say about
huge.
any of it. So don't move to Texas. The next one right below that, but we can talk about that one too. The fact that he's saying that Samsung expansion here is imminent. I think I like that word. I feel that it makes logical sense for Samsung to be bullish here. So that's exciting to know that it's semi-validated. Let me know who your friend is, the VP, and then we'll have a further conversation.
Does your VP friend need to buy a $20 million lake house? I know the perfect home.
Samsung's not over there, Jeremy. Stop it.
Yeah, but a VP's going to live by the lake, man. They're not going to live like Elon in a trailer down by the river.
They might have, well, they're not going to have one. Come on.
What was that?
They're not going to have one place.
Yeah. Don't move to Texas says I'm exempt from property taxes. So the place that me and my wife are looking at are the highest because we can get the best bang for our buck. Very true. Now, the reality is,
I have stuff to say about that too. I'll say it after you.
The reality of this situation, and I agree with you 100%. So typically, Sarah knows this very well, but if you're VA and you're 100% disabled, you don't pay property taxes in Texas. Fantastic. Thank you for your service. Thank you for going through that. We appreciate you. And on top of that, you don't have to pay taxes. Amazing. Thank you. Okay. Get past that. Now let's say you go to sell that property 5 years from now. If you are going to hold that property indefinitely, you're in great shape. If you're going to sell that property, those property taxes have been unchecked for a very long time. And whatever the city decides to say that the home's value is and what the taxes you should be paying, the next person is going to have to pay. The next person may say, man, $30,000 a year in property taxes on a $700,000 home, forget that. So it could come in to bite you in the future, yet that's my only thing on that. So be careful when you're getting a 3% tax rate. I still recommend you be very cognizant of the tax rate that you're going to get with that property. And
man, that's so crazy. I have a bunch of clients like that, right? I have one. What I end up seeing is a lot of people that do their they go to, what is it, Redfin University, and they look up what the property taxes are, not the tax rate, what the property taxes are for the house that they're getting ready to buy. And they're like, okay, this house is only $4,000 in taxes, but it's $750,000, and they get super excited. It's like, whoa. What you don't know is that rate is being assessed at 100% disabled veterans tax rate, which is no property taxes or lower, sorry, not 100%, 50% or whatever, right? So there's some kind of exemption that's doing that, over 65, all these other things. So they're getting super excited with the wrong information. And so they're not putting themselves in a good position. But she already said, yeah, it'll be hard to resale. So
yeah.
That's a good point though, Ian, too. That's why when I ask people when they're putting in an offer and they want like an updated letter, I'm like, okay, give me the property address, especially if they've been very concerned about monthly payment, because I've seen people be like, oh yeah, I saw, like you said, they look on Redfin and like, these taxes are so low, and it's usually over 65 exemption on there. And it's like, that's not what your taxes are actually going to be. And it could make or break if they decide to put an offer in or not, but they need to know that. They can't be surprised like halfway through the process and then lose their earnest money. So that's why I like them giving addresses, so I can look that up for them before getting that letter out. It's good to know.
Yep. All right, we're an hour in. We were going to talk about Elon Musk and everything that's happening. I put out a short video the other day talking about the Boring Company going to be dumping. Sorry, I got unhappy people saying when I said the word dumping, but they are going to process water and then re-put that water back into the Colorado River, based on a small plant that they're putting on. They're trying to get onto the land that they're on. We will make that for next week's video. Ian, you and I are going to be in El Paso on Tuesday. If anybody's in El Paso, we will see you there. We're putting on a huge event. We're doing like Magic Mike style for YouTube. It's going to be great.
Sarah, you're invited. Magic Mikael or whatever it is. How's it go?
Yeah.
Michelle.
More of the story, don't try to buy stuff without a realtor. Realtors find stuff that we could easily overlook, and they fit our back for our back. All right, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody, reach out to Sarah if you need a home loan. Ian and I are your guys in the Austin area for buying a home. We'll see you in the next video. We appreciate you. Ian, say goodbye.